The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, good evening. Welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to writers and journalists and editors and all different people who are writing about the Bronx, who are putting something out about the Bronx. And we also talk to photojournalists. And in our second half of the program, we're going to talk to somebody you know as a reporter and editor, but he's now doing a lot of photojournalism, and we're going to show some of his pictures. But to start the program, let's say good evening to our good friend, Claudia Irizarry Aponte, who is the Bronx reporter for The City. Nice to see you again, Claudia.
Thanks again for having me.
Now, we'll start off with something that you wrote about that we were really planning to talk about, but it turned out to not be totally current, and that was the idea of the sports shops on River Avenue and in the area around Yankee Stadium having to deal with the lockout. But of course, now baseball is back, and they will eventually pick up. What were the concerns? And at this point, are there still concerns about them and their health, their economic health, as we get toward April 7th, which will be opening day?
Absolutely. And as you said, fortunately for these businesses as well as for baseball fans, the lockout is over and the season, a full season, will begin on April 7th. You know, as we know, of course, the season is delayed. So a lot of these businesses were hoping to open to fans on the original start date on March 31st. And before that, for spring training, which would have been happening around this time, now, of course, starts tomorrow. So there is still a delay for a lot of these businesses, but of course, they still have a full season to look forward to. And the concern for a lot of these businesses during the lockout was really the uncertainty. They've had 2 years up to this point where they were mostly without fans coming into their business. Majority of these businesses really work on kind of like a hybrid schedule where they only open on days where the Bronx Bombers play home games. Right. So already, you know, you had 2020 when we had no fans. You had 2021 where the stadiums were not filled to full capacity until really July. And even then, there were maybe people who were weary of attending games with, you know, Delta and then Omicron. So a lot of these businesses were really looking forward to this season. And then after months of uncertainty, now we finally know the season will begin on April 7th without any further delay. It
gets so easy to say, oh, we're back. The businesses will be all right. Unless you are the one opening and closing the gates every day and writing the checks to your landlord and for your electricity and buying inventory, because you certainly want to make sure you're well stocked, because you don't make anything unless you do that. And that involves the shipping and everything else. I do think that, you know, we read the papers about baseball and everything else, but and even the vendors and the ushers at the stadium, but that area around Yankee Stadium is historic. Now, you have spoken to a number of the businesses around there. Just share some of their attitudes and what they said to you and what they're saying.
Yeah, well, the shop owners that I spoke with were in general very frustrated with the state of the lockout and felt that the MLB was stiffing not just the players, but really businesses like the ones on River Avenue that depend on the fans. They really felt that they weren't taking into full consideration, you know, just the cascading effects of this lockout. And we're really looking forward to just everything coming to a full resolution and business opening again, because of course, you know, without games, you don't have fans, you don't have business, you don't have money. It's been 2 years of a pandemic where you don't have, you know, the same crowds as usual. And they were really hoping to the regular amount of crowds to get out of the red. I spoke with bars that were concerned about losing their clientele, souvenir shops, right. But of course you can't really sell, you can't really sell T-shirts and baseball hats if you don't have any fans around.
And you mentioned spring training. Of course, for the Yankees, that would mean in Tampa. But once you get going, and if we were in a normal cycle, so to speak, once March 1st hits, people will start getting excited. They'd be coming in, hey, this year we're going to go to the game, and you bring your kids and you buy them a cap and you get them excited. And none of that happened. And it will, people will come by. I'm not going to pretend that Yankee Stadium won't be filled, but or near filled. But it's a slow developing process for them.
Yeah.
We were talking about it before the show with that whole Nike contract. They looked like they were going to be hit again. I mean, it's like, and we need them so badly. This is the culture of the Bronx and Yankee Stadium, and everybody who's ever been to the stadium walks down River Avenue, and it's a party before and after the games. All right, we get it. Let's hope all's well. It ends well. Let's hope they do well. I do want to talk to you because you wrote about another recreation venue, and that is the Trump Golf Course over there in Throgs Neck. It was said that the former president's contract was going to be canceled. But you have reported that more than a year after that City Hall announcement by the previous mayor, it still hasn't been canceled. And if you drive by there, the Trump banner is still there. What is the status of the Trump Golf Course? Is it something they said that they can't hold up legally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the great mystery of who will be operating the Trump Ferry Point Golf Course in Throgs Neck when the season begins later this spring. So as you noted, de Blasio, after the insurrection at the Capitol, vowed to cancel all of the Trump organization's contracts with the city. That included 2 carousels in Central Park and the ice rink. Or actually 2 ice rinks and the carousel, my mistake. And of course, the Trump Ferry Point Golf Course on Throgs Neck, which was scheduled to be that Trump was scheduled to operate through 2035. Where things stand now is that the city actually named an operator to take over the golf course, but the Trump organization is fighting this cancellation in court. In November, a Manhattan judge actually granted the Trump organization a temporary, victory, granted them an injunction saying that they do have the right to stay until the courts issue a final decision. Meanwhile, the city is pressuring the courts to really announce, hey, what's going to happen to this, because spring season is just around the corner and we still don't know who will be operating this golf course when the time comes.
It sounds like the way you're describing it, that you expect that it will be canceled. I wonder if there will be lawsuits behind it, so that'll put everything on hold. And I don't, my sense is it's not going to be as simple as, well, we're just going to change contracts. Because of course, an agreement is an agreement, whether you liked it or not.
Nothing ever is. And actually, the judge who actually issued the temporary stay seemed to, insinuate that the Trump organization would prevail based on its merits, on the merits of the case. But we just still don't know because the judge has not issued a decision. The city has, officially petitioned through the court asking the judge, hey, please, make a decision. Where do you think stand? When can we expect an answer? And that just has not happened as of today.
And then, of course, I mean, I don't know the ins and outs, but of course, who would be the new operator of it? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's been a controversial project from the minute somebody said, hey, I got an idea. Let's put a golf course down there. Yeah. I want to ask you about something else that you wrote about, and that is convictions of hate crimes. You reported very clearly that most hate crime charges in New York City get dropped before conviction. We hear a lot about all the different hate crimes and things going on. And then we say, well, he's going to be arrested. He's going to be charged with a hate crime. But if they never get there, so why don't you review for us some of the numbers and what some of the issues are that's stopping this from going all the way to, getting some people punished, what I would think is appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's a number of reasons why hate crime charges are dropped in the city's courts. One reason is that the district attorney's office generally like to cut plea deals with the assailants to avoid any sort of jail time. And another reason is that we found is that hate crimes are actually very hard to convict and very difficult to prove. There's a very high standard to prove a hate crime. We spoke with victims who, it's easy for a lawyer or for the police to be able to issue these charges when the assailant uses racist language, when they call a person a slur or they attack them and they use, this racist language. It's more difficult still when someone feels like they were targeted because of their race and ethnicity, as it's happening a lot, unfortunately, in the Asian community. But the person who attacks them doesn't really
didn't
say
use
anything.
a bad word. Wow.
Exactly. And so that's what we're finding is a difficulty in these convictions. And the important thing to note here is that at least of the victims that we spoke with, they don't necessarily want the person who attacked them to go to jail. They understand that maybe this person has a history of mental illness, that they need help, but they're frustrated because they're forced by the system to this is really the only avenue of justice that exists at this point, and even this is failing most of the time for these victims. The conviction rate in the Bronx District Attorney's Office over the last 5 years is just 1% of cases. So clearly a huge problem for victims of these crimes.
I wonder if this comes to a head, and then it becomes an issue that has to go back to the state legislature for them to rewrite the rules, so to speak. So we can do it. Listen, we only have a minute or two left. I'm just so interested in all young reporters who start covering the Bronx. How's it been? Has this been surprising that you get into things like the Trump presidency or into Major League Baseball? So just for you, is it a surprise? Is it frustrating? Have you learned a lot? I'm just curious about that.
Oh, covering the Bronx is an absolute blast. It's the best borough. There's always so much happening. When I started covering this beat on my very first week was the Hunts Point produce market strike. And I was just like embedded in the picket line for a straight week. And then into that, going into political coverage last year with the primary elections. And then, there's always things happening in the courts. Yankee Stadium and the Trump golf course always, a very rich story material.
So I definitely appreciate it. The way that I always look at it with the interviews I do with people like you and others, it's like undiscovered territory. There's so much going on and nobody knows we're here. That's why we do what we do. Anyway, Claudia Irizarry Aponte, thank you so much. Boy, are we grateful that you are covering the Bronx. We really appreciate all the great work that you're doing. And I can guarantee we're going to invite you back here to talk more.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so sweet. Thanks again for having me.
We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk to someone who is or has been covering the Bronx for many years. And he's now a wonderful photojournalist. And we'll do that right after we take this break. Don't go away.